excited to talk about a thing we got coming up.
I'm excited because it's going to be an opportunity for us to interact with our audience in a way never done before.
Never before in the history of how I see it. What we want to celebrate is 2 years.
2
years of how I see it. Which, if you do the math, it's not very much after 100 episodes. So it's a similar celebration, except bigger because it's 2 years. So yeah, we're going to do a Facebook Live or Instagram Live. I haven't decided yet. I don't know. I think you can do both at the same time, actually.
Okay. When are we going to do that?
February 28th.
February 28th.
7 p.m.
7 o'clock on February 28th.
So mark your calendars because we'd love to have you join us. There'll be an opportunity for Q&A. Love to hear your questions. We might even be putting out some questions in the next couple of weeks to be thinking about answering.
Sure.
During the session, like what was your least favorite podcast episode? I'd love to hear that.
Yeah.
A little bit of ribbing was good for us. So bring your questions, bring your answers. Oh, make sure you bring a dad joke. That's your entrance fee.
Just make sure you show up because it wouldn't be fun to do live without some responses.
It wouldn't be fun to be live if it's dead.
Yes, exactly.
February 28th.
7 p.m.
7 p.m. How I See It live.
Live, coming to you. Welcome to How I See It with me, Mark Pratt, and
Justin Sternberg. This is a podcast that works to counter cultural polarization through thoughtful conversations.
I couldn't hear myself for a moment. Made me think whether I was. Thank you. Not sure what I did, but thank you, Justin.
You passed 100 episodes.
Yes.
Good job.
Nice job.
You too.
Well, hey, happy to be here.
Happy to be here.
Happy to be here.
Yes. That was fun getting 100 released and getting some feedback from people and some nice words. So thank you all for being nice.
No doubt. Yeah. And if you needed to be something other than that, we would try not to be offended.
It'd be hard, but we'd try. No offense, but we'd try.
None taken. So how are you, sir?
I'm good.
Yeah?
I'm good. How about you?
You said you were a little sore earlier. You limbering up?
Yeah, I feel a little bit better.
There you go.
Just when you wake up.
Yeah. You get your stretching in one way or the other. As you move, you kind of get your limberness.
Mark was chiding me about my lack of stretching, which is fully warranted.
Well,
the chiding.
I was probably chiding you more about the aging process that is undeniable.
It's the combination, as you age.
It's more of a voice of experience in that aspect of how important it is. But
Mark's very good at stretching.
Yeah.
You got a good little routine.
I try to. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's only because I'm compensating for years of misuse where my body is concerned. It's a consequence.
Right. So I haven't got to that consequence yet.
Well, I'm trying to help you avoid certain consequences. I
remember one time I think you were saying you try to always kneel down to put your shoes on, like stay standing.
No, I stand up.
Stand up.
I stand up. Yeah.
Stay standing so that you can stay limber.
Exactly.
I think about that every time I put my socks in. I'm just like, nope, not happening.
There you You sit down to put your socks and shoes on?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's fair.
Yeah. I got, especially after exercise, Frisbee specifically, my lower back is sore.
Okay.
And so that stretch is very the breath kind of stops your breath.
Oh, wow.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So we got to get you some different stretches.
I got to be stretching.
That lower back.
Probably should be standing up to put my shoes on. That's probably the stretch I need.
Not sure. I did learn another one the other day.
Okay.
It was it's you basically the cat pose.
Yes.
Where you arch your back.
Yeah. Like yoga.
Have Megan actually look at your spine, and if there's any flat spots, kind of put your hand, have her put her hand there, and then move your hips, adjust your hips or your back in such a way to make that arch, because that flat spot indicates a weakness in that area. So that's just
interesting.
That's just a little, yeah. And typically, another time for another story, but yeah.
Everyone's going to be wondering now, but
well, like you say, we'll come back to it.
All right.
We'll come back to it. I can hold that.
Okay.
Yeah. Cat pose.
Cat pose. Yeah. So we are going to talk about being offended.
When was the last time you were offended?
Recent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like within the past week.
Yeah.
Okay.
I get offended regularly.
Really?
Yeah.
It's something you routinely maintain.
Yeah. I enjoy the experience.
Okay.
No, I talk about this at CR, but one of my struggles is resentment. Like, part of my particular personality is trying to figure out why things are the way they are, and yeah. So it's like a lot of times there'll be an initial offended reaction in my body. That's like, well, that's not my fault. That's someone else's fault, and that bothers me. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So and I work through it. I mean, I don't live offended. And I think that's
but would you say the resentment comes from multiple offenses?
Yeah, for sure. But I'm just saying, those multiple come from somewhere. Like,
right.
You track them. You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. That's probably a strong statement to say I get offended a lot, but I don't not get offended.
You don't not get offended.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So you would.
It's official.
You would say that you are possibly more offended than you are not offended.
No.
Oh, well.
Just, if any given week you say, have you been offended in the last week? There's a good chance I'd say yes.
Okay.
And again, just so we're clear, it's not like there's things happening that deserve to be offended at. It's just how I process things. Yeah. So
are there people that tend to offend you more?
All people, especially you.
Yeah. When I start asking questions. But no, I mean,
when I picked this topic, it was not so you could grill me, Mark.
Okay, I'm happy to pull it back in that process.
Well,
but I mean, what?
I just don't want our listeners to know who I'm offended at. It's
what?
They're not sharing these episodes with their friends. So as much as they like them,
what typically offends you?
You got me started now. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not offended, but you should share these with your friends because we have 40 listeners, and that's been that way for a long time.
Okay. But we're thankful for those 40.
We are.
Yeah.
So we keep doing it.
Yeah.
And those 40 are, they are the salt of the earth.
No doubt.
The best 40 people on the earth.
There you go. They are the foundation of how we see it.
That's right.
Yeah.
So we got the ones that matter. Now we just have to get the ones that don't.
Okay. So
that was a joke.
Yes.
I'm not offended by that.
I wasn't offended.
No, I'm making sure our audience knows.
Oh, okay.
Do you understand that?
I did.
No, I'm talking about the
you
audience.
didn't want to offend our audience.
That's right.
I was allowed. Would you like to carry on a further conversation with our audience?
No, I'm good now.
You good?
They seem to understand.
Okay.
All right.
That was the sensation you got?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The vibes.
Fair. That's the vibes. Yeah.
All right. Back to your question.
So yes, what typically offends you? We know people.
Anything that makes me look bad is going to be a trigger for being offended.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And I should fix that statement. Anything that makes me feel like I look bad.
Okay.
Yeah. Can be a trigger for feeling offended.
Okay. So in that process, I'm being mindful that I don't offend you with too many questions. In that process, what do you do with that?
Well, it's the same thing as like a lot of the conversations. You just kind of work through it. You think about it. You process it. You figure out if it's worth being offended at. But, being offended is one of those things that you can't necessarily control the impulse, but you have a choice what you do with the impulse.
Sure.
So I try to choose the right thing, which in any given situation can vary, right? It can be like, stop, you're being stupid. That's nothing to be offended at.
Who typically says that to you?
Me.
Oh, okay.
That's what I'm saying. The processing.
That's part of your process.
Yeah,
you
just
do
like,
that internally.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I think the answer is just processing it.
Okay.
The simplest answer.
Yeah.
And then you do with it what you need to do. I do with it what I need to do,
Do you have any tools?
Why don't you answer these questions, Mark? Tools, go ahead.
Yeah, do you have any tools that help you with that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like every time we get into these questions about me, they're the same answers. So forgive me if I'm saying the same thing, but CR has taught me a lot about reflection and about the fact that so much of what's wrong in the world is me. Like I'm the problem. It's me. Everywhere I go, it's me. So I've learned to bring that to every struggle, and sometimes as I'm processing, I'm going, yeah, but no, it's not me. It's you. And so then that's where resentment comes in. That's where it's harder to work through. But if, and a lot of the times this is true, if during the processing I can go, yeah, it's that part of me that just doesn't like that, that little clip we just watched, she talked about what base emotion is it triggering, and what sensations.
What sensations?
Yeah.
So
I process those sensations and am able to say, oh, it just makes me feel embarrassed. Is very often the sensation that's triggering for me. I'm just embarrassed, and do I need to be embarrassed about this? Well, not really.
Well, embarrassment is actually the emotion you're feeling.
Yeah. Okay.
Where do you tend to feel that, or how do you tend to feel that? If we're thinking about sensation, what do you feel? This is good self-awareness.
This is a therapy session with Mark.
But I think it's a beneficial thought when we're thinking about tools. Exactly.
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I think at times so often our emotions are driven by our sensations. That ability that my mouth is dry, my stomach is tight, my stomach is in knots. Your stomach can have multiple, sensations, but you can also feel the restriction in your chest. Some people feel tightness. Some people
I think that's it. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
That's fair.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. Good job.
There you go.
You figured it out.
So now when you feel that tightness in your chest, it's likely a certain emotion that's going to precede that, after that, come after that. Mm-hmm. And then being able to recognize, okay, that process, the so is what do I need? Or what do I want even? Mm-hmm. And it can come back. And I think so often we talk about it, or we have talked about, the love styles. We talked about the primal questions, mm-hmm. A lot of this comes back from that aspect of what do I need? And is that need being met or not met?
Yeah.
And that kind of thing. And I think, mm-hmm. When we come into those stressful situations where I'm perceiving there is a stress based on, offenses. Mm-hmm. I think you did a great job of describing how you're trying to grow in yourself and others' awareness. Mm-hmm. Because you're recognizing part of this is just you, but it may not all be you.
Right. Yeah, and a lot of times too, when you peel them apart, when I do,
mm-hmm.
As far as tools go, when I'm able to process it, and I think as far as tools go, one of the things too is like try not to do anything about being offended in the moment while your chest is you're feeling the sensations. Because in my case, when I'm offended, usually it's not something to do something about.
Sure,
that's the truth.
It's more of a reaction.
Yes. So learning to that sensation is not, something to fight or flight about. Like you probably should, if anything, for me, it's about stepping away or out.
Sure.
Even if it's just mentally from the situation, to say, all right, what's going on here, and processing.
It's a great point. I'm just curious at this point in that awareness, if you will, that I can react, but it's probably not beneficial.
Yeah.
Have you ever noticed that as you listen, sometimes you realize there was no need to be offended?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
think that's an important part too, when we can recognize, okay, that may have sounded offensive, and I may have been offended, but that was not the intention.
Right. Yep. So that's what I was going to say too, is like the work is peeling apart me versus it.
Sure.
And often once I'm able to peel that apart, it becomes clear what needs to be done. And usually it's nothing. It's internal work, right? Of letting it go, of accepting, this wasn't how I perceived it, that kind of thing. Every once in a while, or whatever, you peel it apart, you see that there is some fault on that side. But when you look at the balance, the scale, you're like,
sure,
it's pretty heavy on my side.
Yeah.
And it's
Justin's
not
using his hands as a scale, and his left hand is way in the air, and his right hand's way down by his waist. So,
thank you. What about now?
It's the opposite. Nice job. You just tipped the scale. Exactly. You were no longer offended,
That's
Justin.
right.
How did that feel? How did that feel?
Felt good. Felt like a weight was lifted off the scale.
Lifted. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, once I remove myself from the scale, and it's like, it changes the things.
No doubt.
Yeah, that analogy falls apart, but yeah,
it's okay.
But yeah, how about you?
How about me? What?
All of the questions you asked me. Let's start with: what was the first question? Do you get offended, Mark? I think that was the first question.
I do.
All right. Have you been offended in the last week?
Yes, I have.
All right. Who was it?
It was actually Chris and I. We got in, and I think what will typically offend me is when someone, and I think, it's part of our human nature. This is nothing against Chris. I likely do it to her, but in that process of telling someone what they are, based on an experience, like, that aspect of if someone's telling me what I think or what I'm doing, that can tend to offend me when I recognize that I can understand how what I did, my action, like say my action made you or Chris or, feel like you weren't important.
Yeah.
In that process, because I made a specific choice to do something different than what you were thinking I would do.
Yeah.
And then that goes so far as to say, well, you did that because, you were trying to tick me off.
Yeah. When there's motive assigned.
Yes. Yeah. That is the, a time when I can feel offended.
Yeah.
And yet, like you're saying, we still have a choice as to whether we become defensive, in that process, or whether we say, okay, I can respect the fact that my action was viewed that way.
Yeah.
And that wasn't my intention, but I can understand how it can be conceived that way. Mm-hmm. And I think that's, granted, and I think that adds to the, kind of that third, we were talking about stress management, self and others awareness. And I think that comes back to the third part of that, which would be rupture and repair. Mm-hmm. Because conflict is going to happen. We're going to be offended by people. But at the same time, are we able to take that awareness, from myself and others into what I use in such a way that is actually able to repair? And I think that's so often what happens is in that offense, if I stay there, that's just like staying in the rupture, staying in the conflict. And I think that's why, we tend to avoid conflict for so many people, is because it tends to seem as if it is wrong.
Yeah.
Conflict is a bad thing. And I don't think I think it is viewed that way because so rarely do we come to the other side of finding the resolution.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and back to the
offense.
Back to being offended. I think too, conflict and resolving conflict becomes much harder when we don't have a good filter on our offenses, or a good filter between our offenses and conflict.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I think it gets very hard to, again, resolve conflict if every time I'm offended, I'm attempting to resolve the conflict.
Sure.
Externally with this person or this situation.
Yep. And I think like we talked about, that reactive part that is in between the two, from my perspective, is what makes the resolution very difficult.
Yeah.
You follow me there?
Yeah.
Because if we're just doing it out of reactivity, you said that on purpose.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then it's like, well, that's already starting in a negative trajectory at that point, or an unhealthy, transition. And I think, that's an important part, but I didn't mean to interrupt, but that reactive part keeps us from finding the conflict resolution sometimes, in the process of the offense. Yeah.
And I think, being offended is reactive. I think that's the thing to accept and understand about being offended, is that it is reactive.
Sure.
You're not offended at something that doesn't exist. Therefore, you are reacting to something that does exist. And so it is reactive. And the reason I'm saying that is because I think sometimes we think of reactivity as a negative thing. It's not a negative thing. It's just a reality.
Sure.
But allowing the whole process to be reactive is where the problem is. Like, I think as Viktor Frankl says, in between stimulus and response, we have the power to choose our response.
Sure.
Right. And so if we remove that choice and we just act according to the reaction comes, and then we react according to that stimulus.
Sure.
Without the choice, we are essentially animals. We're acting on animal instinct, and that's how animals act. But we are not animals, and that's the beauty of being God's creation. He made us in His image, and therefore, right between the thing that makes us, fight or flight, and actual fight or flight, we do have a choice to examine the thing, and decide: should I fight? Should I flight? Or is there an alternate solution here?
Sure.
And I think, with being offended, that is going. If you're anything like me and Mark and you get offended in the last week, like that's something you have to learn and practice, right?
Yeah. And I think I really appreciate the way you're setting that up, even in that process, because, so often different people will talk about, lizard brain or, and mammalian brain, depending on your evolutionary perspective. But, from a design characteristic, I do think, our primary function, that fight or flight mechanism, is designed to keep us alive. It's an important factor. And yet we don't always have to react with that. We can recognize, the difference between, a muffler backfire and a gunshot.
Right.
We can understand how one might make us react differently, but they can both be so similar. But I think so often we have the ability to use our other senses and process it and say, okay, no, car was going by. It's still kind of running rough. It makes perfect sense. That was just a car backfiring. You follow me? And I think when I think our senses are God-given in that aspect, to where that's our warning sign in some ways, that God has given us to be able to say, okay, I'm feeling a certain way. I'm feeling something, and likely I'm going to be feeling a certain emotion here shortly. And I think being able to make that recognition to choose, then I'm better equipped to be able to say, okay, what do I want? And I think, as you allude to the clip, so often the things that offend us are is just conflict in general, things that are arguable, because most things are, depending on the people you're around, some people just like to argue for the sake of arguing.
Right.
They may not even necessarily agree or not agree with you.
I don't agree with you, Mark.
Like that.
Exactly.
That's a perfect example. But being able to recognize, like you're saying, I still have the choice to say, okay, am I going to be offended by that? Because something arguable. And I think,
See, I haven't learned how to make that choice. I haven't learned how to decide. Well, I guess I choose not to be offended.
There are
it's
certain things
to be done.
But there are certain things you have learned to choose not to be offended by anymore.
Sure.
Is that fair?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because part of what initiated our kind of the topic was this aspect of a person wrote in and to a person asking about being offended by, is it David?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's Michelangelo's David.
Yeah.
Where he's basically naked.
Yeah.
And
his junk is hanging out.
And a person was offended by that.
Yeah.
And it's like
in a classroom.
In a classroom setting. Yes.
Yeah. That was distracting and yeah.
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 And I respected, how the article was set up, in this process. Okay, that is a choice that we have to be offended, but can we remove all art, if you will, all statues, all of the Michelangelo Davids, can we remove them from our
existence? Poof. Could you do
snap your fingers?
What's his name?
Thanos.
Can you Thanos? I mean, even then, you'd only lose half of it. So
there you
still
go.
Got to figure out how to deal with the other half.
Yes. So yes, certain things will offend us, and yes, you have learned that you don't have to be offended by those things anymore.
Yeah. So I guess my distinction there is that I don't necessarily get to choose the offended feeling. But I do choose whether I, act upon that offense, and I think that's, for me, a key distinction in the same sense that I don't necessarily get to choose my emotion, but I do get to choose what to do about the emotion.
Sure. And we can establish in some ways your sensation, your emotion, and what you want are some of those non-arguables. In other words, I can't argue the fact that your stomach just dropped and you felt that tenseness in your chest. That's something only you can do. There's no use in me arguing that point.
Yeah.
Let alone what that feeling responded. The response was that feeling, reaction was that feeling, and there's likely something you want that statue removed. You follow me? Those are non-arguables from my perspective. And I think it's an important thing to be able to say, okay, that's where you're at.
Yeah.
And likely the fact that, you felt unappreciated, we can bring it back to that primal question, I think, in some ways. Those are likely some of the basis for that offense. I felt unimportant. I felt unloved. I felt weak.
Yeah.
Just had to throw that in there.
That's right.
But, in that process, I felt
like any other number besides 7, and therefore I felt weak.
There you go.
Sorry.
I put it out there. I
did.
put it out there. I set it up. I put it on a tee. Yeah. So coming back to the offense, we can't necessarily remove everything that offends us.
Can I read that quote real quick?
Of course.
Yeah, from that article.
This is your computer screen. So yes.
That's right. Well, it ties into what you're saying. The article was kind of like ask whatever this guy
Sure.
is, your questions.
Kind of a
And-
Dear Abby of sorts.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
And he's like, "Am I stupid?" The guy wrote it. Am I stupid for being offended by this, or is it realistic to expect, to ask, be able to ask them to take it down, that kind of thing. He starts by saying, "You're not stupid, and you certainly don't have to look at it. You don't even have to look at anything anywhere ever. You could wear blinders, or even full on blind yourself surgically." Or you could start a campaign to try and eliminate that particular drawing and every other drawing you don't like from the face of the earth. It would take a lot of work, and in the end, you'd probably end up looking at, thinking about, and obsessing over the image you're trying to get rid of more than ever before. Maybe eventually you could figure out a way to never see it, hear about it, or think about it again. Or maybe there's another way. And he goes on to, discuss that.
Yeah.
And then later he says, "So do whatever you really feel you should do here, but be warned, it's a slippery slope. There will always be another poster or another experience or another idea that offends you." And I think, even the fact that Mark gets offended should be proof that you're going to deal with offenses in your life. Like, that's a reality. That's just part of it. And I would say that's a big part of being alive. It's your senses interacting with the world around you. And
Sure.
Some senses are good, some senses are bad. She kind of boiled it down to, I want to say 5, but it's like, there's basically good feelings and bad feelings. And the bad feelings tend to push you towards, being offended in some way.
I would argue good and bad, but yes, I hear where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Comfortable and uncomfortable, probably.
Thank you. Yeah. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking of the smiley face and the happy face.
Sure.
Some make you have the, a smile that's aiming down, and some make it aiming up.
Sure.
That's very simplistic. Yeah.
Yeah.
There are other emotions that don't do either. There's the
surprise
emotion. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
We
No
need to
doubt.
get some emojis up in here.
Oh.
There's one for every emotion.
So yeah, and I think the other part I liked about you alluded to it too, that what is it about that thing that tends to offend me? And you mentioned, that, the fact that this person didn't like looking at David's junk, that kind of thing. And I think, even that is a reflection on, what is it about that area, our genitals, if you will, that, makes it offensive or junk or whatever, in a artistic, statuesque type, dynamic. And I realize, there can be a slippery slope there as well, but being able to recognize, okay, what is it about that personally offends me, from in that context.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's, made me think of a rabbit hole.
Well, you're welcome to share the rabbit hole if you desire.
All right. I think about how some people get offended, the most offended by the things that they're secretly struggle with. Right. So,
Okay.
Yeah, I can think of examples from, the church where, pastors would really rail against, like, adultery and that kind of thing. And then, but yet they have a secret, words aren't coming to me, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah. So in other words,
affair.
fair.
Yeah. So
Exactly.
it's like, it's almost you're overcompensating.
Sure.
And so I think sometimes our offenses can be that, and I know mine can be that, where I'm offended that you're trying to get attention. That's one that gets to me a lot. Someone's trying to get attention, I get offended. Like, why are you trying to get attention? It's like, I know why. Because I want the attention you're getting.
Sure.
As an approval addict, it's like, that there's a limited scarcity mindset, right? Like you're getting what now I can't get what you're getting kind of thing.
If you're getting it, I can't.
Yeah. So that's like the bare emotion, like the raw thing that it comes down to a lot of times.
That's the thought.
Yeah, where I have to go, oh, that's just my ugly. Give me that.
Sure.
Coming out again, and again, once you kind of assess that on the scale, and I go, oh yeah, a lot of that's just my primal need for people, that sense of purpose, I guess.
That was your 7, yeah.
Yeah, where it's
Yeah.
like, I don't know why. I feel like the whole approval thing doesn't tie to the purpose. It ties more to am I wanted, which
hear
might
you.
be my wing
I got you.
thing.
Yeah.
Like he talks, he doesn't call it a wing. He
Like
calls
your
it,
enneagram.
yeah, but
Yeah.
he has a term for the side ones.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Like secondary
Yeah.
question.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. I
Sure.
forget what he calls it.
Kind of like love
It's not
languages. You can
secondary,
have a
it's-
primary love language, but you might have
Yeah.
a secondary one.
Yeah.
It's-
Which,
yeah.
that makes perfect sense. But
Sure.
anyway, back to the thing about being offended. When I look at the scale and I go, oh, a lot of that's just my ugly primal, I want that. I take that off the scale and it's left with you saying, you want that. I'm like, well, I don't blame you. So do I. So have at it. It's like the offense just kind of drops off because I can recognize we're in the same boat here.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And you're striving for this attention. And maybe they are, maybe they're not. Like that.
Yeah.
I'm saying worst case scenario, you're getting what I want to get.
Sure.
So you
And
know what I'm
that's
saying? It's
and
like,
that's that third part. What do
Third
I
part.
want?
yeah. What do I
Because
want? Yes.
that's typically
Yes.
I'm offended when I'm
Yes.
not getting what I want. Yours might be
Yep.
attention. Someone else might be control. Someone else might be power. Someone
Yep.
else, you follow me?
Yep.
Those things that I want,
Yep.
and I'm perceiving it in such a way that I'm not getting. I'm not the priority.
Mm-hmm.
You just did something different, and that made me feel as if I'm no longer important. You follow me? That process. So
Yeah.
I'm not getting what I want at that moment. And I think that's an important part of that, being able to recognize my awareness. Because what do I do when I don't get what I want?
Yeah. I roll on the floor and pound my fist.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's what I do. It works every time.
As long as everybody gets tired of that behavior and they say, okay, you get your way,
That's
right?
right.
Yeah,
It
no one
works.
challenges that behavior.
So far, so good.
Nice.
Yeah. You should try it. You asked for tools.
I did. Yeah, I didn't ask for the tools of a 2-year-old, but I asked for
Oh, that actually is a good segue. I think in CR we talk about a lot of our behaviors our negative behaviors are a result of learning how to deal with a problem when we were young.
Sure.
An offense when we were young. And we've taken that same behavior into our adulthood.
stress management.
Yeah. But I'm saying, yeah, okay, maybe. But we're
Yeah.
basically the same habits that we had to deal with it when we were young. Like, ooh,
Sure.
I want attention, right? Like, so I'm
Yeah.
going to be funny. We bring, you think about Robin Williams is a good example of that. Like, he learned to cope with dysfunction in his home by being funny.
Sure.
And if he could make his mom laugh, things were light in the home, and he took that into adulthood. And of course, we all benefited from
Yeah.
it from a time, but it also, I think, is partly what took his life, in the sense that he was always striving to solve the problems with being funny, and he couldn't
Sure.
solve all of life's problems by being funny.
Yeah. To be able to process the emotion underneath that
Yeah.
discomfort
Yes.
of being able to process those deeper, harder emotions, like we're not necessarily positive or negative, but, comfortable or uncomfortable, happiness, or, that becomes that comfortable emotion. So I have to produce that in order to minimize my stress over the more uncomfortable ones where my needs might not be met. And I think that's exactly what, 1 Corinthians 13 talks about towards the end, around 11 or 12, where it talks about, when I was a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child, but when I became an adult, I put my childish ways behind me. And I'm willing to recognize we don't always put all of those childish ways behind us.
Often we don't, I would say. I think
Yeah.
we become adults and we learn so many ways. We become mature, but there are often some primal things we carry with us into
Sure.
adulthood, which are still childish.
Yeah.
And we don't put those things away. And I think that's where therapy can come in handy, right? Like, is to
Well,
learn.
and even that ability to process my
Right. So whatever way you can get to that, And
Yeah.
so therapy can help you get to that, but
Sure.
also listening to How I See It can help you get to that. So you're welcome. Programs like Celebrate Recovery or How We Love, or
Sure.
anything that can make you kind of
Journaling.
stop. Yes.
Journaling.
Yes, journaling. Yes.
Can be a strong.
Yes. Anything that can help you to take in a stimulus and then right between it, do something about it.
Sure.
Anything that can coach you in that is going to be very helpful in helping you put, what is
Self and
the
others'
verse?
awareness as
Yeah,
well.
about
Put that as far
childish
as
things.
putting my childish ways behind me.
Yeah, that.
Yeah.
That anything like that's going to help you get to that point.
Because I think what happens is, and I think your example of throwing a temper tantrum and laying on the floor.
Yeah.
We all have these cycles and patterns that have been developed over time. So what do I typically do when I don't get that thing that I want or need?
Yeah.
That's what that becomes. And so being able to say, no, I'm okay, when I don't get what I want.
Yeah.
And yet I can still communicate that I was disappointed.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean I'm disappointed in you. That just means I'm disappointed in that circumstance.
Yeah.
And therefore I did that thing that sometimes I do.
Yeah, that's good. I think one of the things I've really learned over the last several years, partly a lot from you, also a little bit from therapy, also a little bit from CR and stuff like that, but really more from a therapeutic perspective, is prior to kind of understanding a lot of these things, my thought was anxiety, stress, anger, whatever, bad.
I hear
and
you.
you've corrected that in this conversation many times, which I just want to call out because it's so valuable to say it's not about bad or good. It's about comfort or discomfort. And so what I've had to learn, and I'm slowly learning, and it's still hard, is that you're not going to eradicate the discomfortable moments from your life. There's those things that offend you. You're not, like that, like he was joking about, you can't remove every offensive image from the earth or whatever. You cannot get to a place of enlightenment, in my estimation.
Sure.
Maybe some monks have figured it out. I don't know, because they're very. We should talk about meditation at some point, because there is some power in that, and I don't want to take away from that. And there's room there to grow in terms of how much offends you and like how many of those stimuluses impact you in a negative way. However,
that would be that awareness of where my sensation is.
Yeah,
that would be the beginning of that part. But yes, however. Sorry, did I break your chain of thought? I apologize.
Yeah. So my whole idea was you could lessen, minimize, almost eradicate kind of those negative impulses, and you become this enlightened individual who doesn't get, bothered, essentially. And I think what I've learned is that a lot of those things that bother you are neutral. They can be helpful. They can be healthy. They, anxiety can teach you, right, that it can teach you many things. It can teach you you're in danger, for instance. That's a good thing. Like if you feel anxiety about walking down a certain alley at night or whatever, that's probably a good, healthy emotion to feel, in the sense that you should be alert. You should be,
I think that's a great awareness. And I think, that's the beauty of seeing emotions as emotions, because I would dare say, it's perfectly healthy to feel sad when I lose a loved one.
Yeah.
You follow me?
Yeah.
And if I'm just fighting that because I don't like feeling sad, then I'm, exhibiting, or I'm dealing with a lot of extra stress about the fact that I'm feeling sad, when if I'm just able to be in that moment and recognized I've lost someone who's important to me, and my ability to feel sad is just a testimony to the depth of that relationship.
Yeah.
That's a perfectly healthy thing to do.
And you
should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's true of all negative or uncomfortable emotions, that there is a place for them that's healthy.
Yes.
Anger also.
Sure.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. I think, kind of going back to what I was saying, the thing that I'm learning myself,
Yeah.
and that's been a little bit hard to accept, but also good to accept, is that there are certain thorns of the flesh, like Paul said, where it's like, I really want those things gone from. I don't want to be offended when someone's trying to get attention and I want the attention. Like, that to me is so primal, right?
I hear you.
And almost childish, feels very childish to me. And I want that to stop being a thing.
Sure.
Like, come on.
Sure.
Come on. That's silly, you know?
Yeah.
And yet, I haven't been able to figure out how to prevent that initial thing, like in certain and often too, it's not just that singular thing. It's a combination of events or a combination of things that have put me in a certain point where I'm not at my best, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Does that? Yeah.
It makes perfect sense. And here's another little tidbit, if I may. What you describe as childish.
Yeah.
I would flip that to a certain degree and look at it in the aspect of, okay, I'm feeling childish. How can I make it childlike? In other words, when I think we're able to look at it from a childlike, I think Jesus encourages a childlike faith. You follow me?
Yeah.
And I think when we're able to look at it in a more...
So do that for me with
sure,
this particular
with your example.
thing. Yeah, use that.
Your example to look at it in a childlike manner would be almost to be able to say, okay, that person likes to be affirmed just like I do. So we're all childlike in this sense of being able to say, oh, it's that person's turn. That's cool. They got the turn. And, I mean, that in some ways flips the script. Yes.
Yeah.
In such a way that
some innocence to it.
Flips the scale.
Yeah.
In other words, to be able to say, yeah, we all desire affirmation. And that person got their turn. My turn's coming someday. I don't know when it is, but I hope the people around me are happy when it's my turn. That they're not, well, what did he do? That childish perspective, that the jealousy, crazy jealousy, I'll call it. But, that aspect to where I think, if we can kind of wrestle with that childish versus childlike, and I think, so often, those, I think children do it better. Yeah. Because I think as we age, we find more things to be offended about. Whereas, children, healthy children, they have their needs met. They rely on healthy parents, in such a way that says, oh, wow, that's cool, because we can almost see that childlikeness that has the ability to celebrate, the little things, that isn't easily offended, because there's this security in that process. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Good stuff.
Makes sense?
It does, yeah.
Yeah. And I think, even as adults, our ability to play is sometimes, like even Frisbee, we're offended when I didn't necessarily get my way or I thought somebody should do something differently. But yet, if I'm able to flip that in such a way that says, okay, that first person, and by the way, I fell on you on Sunday, and I do apologize for falling on you on Sunday.
It was like a feather, Mike.
Yeah, well, I'm glad, but I'm not offended by that. You just call me a lightweight, but that's okay. But yes,
I wouldn't have assumed that.
It was funny because Leanne drew it to my attention. It's like, you just fell on him. You didn't even put your hands down. It's like, I didn't want to put my hands down because it was like, where would I put them? If I put them right on his face and I put my weight, it's like, so it's like, just lay out and the whole body goes down. And so, yeah, I do apologize for
Maybe
falling.
that's why I'm sorry this morning. That's a good point.
It just caught up with you 3 days later, give or take.
After the next Frisbee session.
Yeah. It wasn't really last night. It was residual from Sunday. But I do apologize for.
It's all good. I'm not offended.
Okay,
but that is a good segue. Frisbee you can get offended, or you can recognize this is a game.
Yes.
Which actually, I'm trying to let's see if I can stretch that analogy. I think we can make that work in life too. Like let's make it less serious and say, remember, this is all just a game in a sense of this is an opportunity to learn and grow and have fun. Or this is serious and this is real life and it's like, especially when you realize that like when you can accept that there's a God of the universe, he's your higher power, and this whole thing's under his control, and I'm just a character, you know, that gets to play the game.
Sure.
I think sometimes that can help me too, in the sense of, just recognizing that this isn't so serious because he's got this.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah.
It kind of coming back to that
take that.
comparison thing of like they're getting attention, I'm not. It's like, you know, that same idea of like, well, it's his turn, you know?
Sure.
Yeah, on the game board, you know?
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
Gotta mute my dings. Sorry about that. If you thought that was your text message, it wasn't. It was mine. But I'm not gonna look at it.
That's okay. Even if you did.
Because Mark would be offended.
No, I wouldn't be offended.
Our listeners would be offended.
No.
They wouldn't know. You wouldn't even know.
I would dare say, I'm not sure. You brought up technology. And technology, I would consider myself technologically averse.
Offended.
But I'm not sure I'm offended. I'd have to.
All right.
Yeah.
I brought up emojis earlier, and I expected more of a reaction by you. Like a harumph.
Oh, yeah?
We just moved on. I said there's an emoji for every emotion. Or something.
Yeah.
And I thought you would take issue with that. But
I realized there are multiple emojis. We had a discussion the other day whether the praying hands is actually a high five.
Oh.
So if you...
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you look up...
I've never seen it used that way.
You've never seen a high five?
No, I've never seen the praying hands used as a high five.
Well, you look them up. It's if you try to look up one.
No, I'm not saying I don't think anyone has ever done it. I'm saying in my experience.
You've never received a high five?
Not using
form?
The praying hands.
Oh, wow.
There's also a fist bump one. So I've gotten that one.
Feel free to send Justin the praying hands high five for anything he does well, because he likes the attention.
The applause. That's right.
The affirmation.
Well, I'll just assume you're praying for me, or that you're thankful, because that's the other thing too. People use it as like a thank you.
Yep.
You know, a thank you or a praying.
Yeah.
That's been my experience, Mark. But I can't argue with your experience. It's inarguable. I've learned that today. High five.
So yes, high five. Nice.
You have to hold it there a second for it to match the emoji.
Yeah. But see,
or is it just frozen in time?
If it's frozen in time.
Okay.
But so that being said, we hope this has been a helpful opportunity just to recognize that yes, things will offend us.
Yep.
Part of the human equation.
Yep.
And yet what we do about that becomes a choice. And likely there is something that I desire to change, something I want, but yet another person may want that same thing or just a different thing. And that's not always a wrong thing. It's just part of being human. So
gotta learn to process it.
What fun we have. And that being said, this is how I see it.
Hey, thank you for listening to our podcast. If you like How I See It, please do all the things that podcasts tell you to do. Subscribe, rate, review, follow us, and or talk nicely about us on social media. If you want to reach out, the email is us@howiseeit.click. Yep, I said .click, as in .click. Please tell your friends about this show, and we'll see you on the next one.